Whether you've been homeschooling for years or you're just thinking about taking the plunge, let us help you put the edge in your child's education here on The Homeschool Edge with your host, public school teacher turned homeschool hero, Aaron Potzik.
Hello and welcome back to The Homeschool Edge. Today's show is packed full. You're not going to want to miss a minute of it. Today, I'm going to tell you about a free resource if you have children or, hey, you just want to learn that are prepping for the SAT or ACT. I've got a dynamite app I'm going to tell you about. We're going to talk about an article in my local paper, Daytona Beach, on homeschooling and see how they did covering that issue. We also have a special guest, Dr. Henderson, a professor at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, and we're going to get thoughts from a rocket scientist about homeschooling. Oh yeah, and somewhere in between, we'll peek in on the public schools and see how things are going. Next up, it's Homeschool Headlines. All right, everybody, welcome to Homeroom Headlines, and you guessed it, we're joined by the one, the only Principal B. What's up, Principal B?
Hey, just this guy.
Yeah.
This guy, huh? All right.
Yeah. Lots of comments about Principal B. People are kind of calling you the bee's knees, so I guess that's good.
Glad to hear that I'm creating a buzz.
Yeah, you certainly are. All right. Well, Principal B, this article comes from my local Daytona Beach News Journal, and its title is Uptick in Homeschooling Continues in Volusia. That's the county I'm in. Flagler, the county north of us. Some experts call out deficiencies. That's a surprise. Yes, let's look at the article here just for a moment. It starts by following this woman who is Mrs. Miller, who is raising her kids, started in Marion County, and then they moved to Volusia. And she talks about 30 years ago when she saw the school, it was really dilapidated. Chunks of plaster were falling onto the food in the cafeteria, so the kids had to all eat in their rooms.
That sounds like some structural deficiency.
Yeah, perhaps the deficiencies have multiple meanings. Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah, so she said, she couldn't imagine her little girl in an unsafe building like this, and
Sure.
They reevaluated years later when they moved to Volusia County, and she said in the beginning, Miller wrote her lessons, then switched over to prepackaged curriculum, trying Florida Virtual School and Connections Academy. Both are great programs. Now she uses easy peasy all-in-one homeschool. It's just listing all of the options now that are available compared to years past. Now, back to what I was saying before, when they moved to Volusia County in 2003, Miller and her husband reconsidered sending their children to public schools, but decided against it because they were concerned about subjecting their kids to bullying and other pressures. Now, last week, the article we covered, the parent basically said, look, in real life, you interact with a bully, you don't hang around that person anymore. But school, you're sort of forced to. So this is a consistent theme here, Principal B.
Yes, it is. And I do remember that conversation. I recall having pushing a very contrived Friends analogy that to varying degrees of success, depending on who you are in the audience.
Yeah. So we're not going to say anymore. You're going to have to go back and watch the previous episode. So
yes, I'd recommend that.
Yeah, I would too. All right. Well, now we hear from a guy named Nate Malkus. He is a senior fellow at American Enterprise Institute, a public policy think tank based in Washington, D.C., said there is reason to be concerned about the rapid increase of homeschooled students during the pandemic.
Oh, dear.
He says, and I quote, deciding that you're going to homeschool your kids in August 2020 is very different from deciding that a year prior when the pandemic wasn't there. He said, And so you may have parents who aren't quite as prepared, parents who are doing it not because this was a choice that made sense, but because their other options were just unsatisfactory.
But
You know,
isn't that why the decision would make sense?
right. This is what I was gonna say. He's trying to use. Now, I didn't intend to go into this logical moment, but he's trying to make a distinction without difference. It's kind of like this is
Right.
different than this, but they're really the same thing.
Yeah, yeah.
So that
I don't
seemed
trust this Nate fellow.
Yeah. It seemed to be a problem to me as I was studying and reading, and to hear your very first response to hearing it was the same as mine. I feel comforted. I feel comforted.
Great minds buzz alike, my friend.
Yes, they do. All right. He continues, Mr. Malchus. He expressed concern with the lack of benchmarks. Now, listen to him double speak here. Some of the weaknesses of homeschooling are sort of quality assurance as to make sure your students are learning what they need to learn to sort of keep up. He said, these problems are also persistent in public schools.
I see. So it's the same.
Yeah, I will fully admit, but I think that's a concern that should be a concern for people because we want these students to succeed and do well.
Okay, well, sure, it should be a concern for people, just generally speaking.
Yes.
When we're talking about educating our children, we should be concerned about this wherever they're being educated.
Right. So
and he even points that out. So I'm glad to hear that Nate, who seemed a little bit suspicious in his logic, I'm glad to see that we're both on the same side of the issue now.
Apparently we are. He's putting this lack of benchmarks at a huge weakness for homeschooling, and then in the same sentence he's saying, yeah, definitely it's a problem in public schools too.
Yeah.
Where'd they find this guy?
I don't know, but I know that I feel a lot more concerned about homeschooling after reading his article.
Oh my gosh. If that was the point, he got the job done. Now, this was the call out deficiencies kind of thing, which doesn't make any sense when you read the article. And by the way, you're not supposed to read the article. You're just supposed to read the headline and think you know everything. You know, that's how it goes.
Oh, wow. That sounds terrible.
Yeah, right.
I'll never want to homeschool.
Right. Now, the article continues, already documenting one family, and then it gives 2 or 3 other families. One is Deborah Snell, 58 years old, in Palm Coast, which is a city just north of Daytona. And she began homeschooling since she was able to work at her grandson's speed. He's actually autistic. And there, if you even open your eyes a moment, you see all the ways the school is actually failing these autistic students in horrific ways sometimes. But she says an autistic child sometimes can learn something in 5 minutes, or it might take 4 months for him to learn it. So it doesn't do any good to move on to the next subject like he would in school until he's ready.
Sure.
Seems logical. Also, we hear from Ashley Schultz, who's 38, from Daytona Beach. She's got 3 kids, 2 of whom are homeschooled, and her oldest son is now 19 and attending Daytona State. And he was about 2 years ahead of his peers, she says, when his family moved to Florida from Connecticut. Now, they decided homeschooling would be best for him because he could continue working at rigorous speeds that he craved. Also, the family homeschools their 8-year-old son, who has special needs because traditional schooling moved too quickly for him. Now, as a teacher for 17 years in the public school, Principal B, it was so disheartening to see these kids who would pick up what I had planned for a 20, 25-minute lesson. They picked it up in 5, and then they just had to sit there while I tried to pull everybody along. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there's the kids who just had no clue from the start of the lesson, and they had no clue at the end of the lesson. And the next day, guess what we had to do? Move on to the next topic. So, I mean...
That sounds... Correct me if I'm wrong, but that sounds like that could perhaps be a public school deficiency.
I'm glad
I'd be concerned about that if I were a parent whose child was in that situation.
Principal B. Yes, yes. This word deficiency has been a blast to continually apply, hasn't it?
Indeed, it has.
And the Schultzes continue. They love the flexibility of homeschooling. Who doesn't? If my son doesn't feel like doing school first thing in the morning, we can do it later. My kids too. They need to go to work first thing in the morning. Great, they can work, and their employees love them for that because they don't have to be in school, and then they can come home in the afternoon or evening and do their schoolwork. And we can go on field trips every week or even every day if we choose. It's the freedom that comes with that. This has been amazing about homeschooling. We all in our community joke about how we have all of the kids stuff and the children in junior high and high school stuff all to ourselves the entire school year during the day. And then and then when summer's out, the poachers from the public school take over everything. So
right.
We can handle a month or two of having to share, but
yeah, fair enough.
Now, the very last section of the article, Principal B, listen closely. Florida law fails former student.
Dun, dun, dun. This sounds terrible. I don't even know what the news story is, but I am already upset.
I can tell. Now, this one example they found compared to the 5 or 6 or whatever opposite examples they found is all we're given here. And here's what the article says. Samantha Field, now 36, moved to Crestview, Florida in Okaloosa County with her family as a 9-year-old. She was homeschooled there for nearly a decade and now serves as the government relations director at the Coalition for Responsible Home Education, where she educates people on homeschool law. In hindsight, Field views her teen years as, quote, a giant waste of time. She said she did not receive an adequate education, studying only lower levels of math, science, and language arts, and was never exposed to people of diverse backgrounds. It can be frustrating, quote, especially with history, she said. I was taught a completely alternate version of world history and American history that turned out largely not to be true. That's very frustrating as an adult.
Sure. I imagine it would be.
I imagine it would be as well. Now, interestingly enough, one of the things about math in the public schools, and I heard this complaint when I was in high school, I heard it all the years I was teaching, you get into these upper level maths and you have no desire to do anything related to that, yet you are required to continue to take higher level math courses.
This is true.
Yeah, this is sort of the opposite issue too. And notice the ambiguity in what she says here. The lower levels of math, science, and language arts. Wouldn't this be a subjective term here? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I don't yet. I guess technically we don't know exactly what she means.
Right. So lower levels can mean a lot. And to her point about being taught the wrong history, I spent much of my public schooling career correcting the history that was given to the kids to be taught, because it was not from primary sources. It was from secondary sources and rewritten by people not using sources from the time the people lived. So
yeah, I was thinking that when she was registering that complaint, that that's a complaint that would resonate with pretty much every student that goes to public school.
Right.
Like I didn't learn history. I learned this alternate version of history.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. Well, Principal B, it's time for the first official logic moment, where I take a look at the article we're talking about, and I give you a logical fallacy, a problem with what this article has done. And it should be no surprise to anybody that it's pretty easy reading any newspaper. So today's logic moment fallacy is a generalization. All right. Now, generalization is a word most people are aware of. A generalization, of course, is when you make a broad comment about a group of people or a type of thing, or you speak in general. And so what this article did, it took one sample of one person that was homeschooled and tried to use that to color all of the homeschooling experience underneath that light. And the problem is, if it really is that way, well, why did we only have a sample size of one? And why, on the other side, did we have multiple diverse opinions that supported the rest? So this article is very guilty of making a generalization.
Good logical point.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And it does speak to the fact maybe that was her experience, and maybe she was not given an ideal homeschool experience. But to your experience doesn't mean that is endemic of all of homeschools.
Exactly. Well, Principal B, I think we have turned this article inside out, upside down, and there's not a lot left to say. What do you think? Any final thoughts?
I think that we've done the full 360, and you're clear to move on.
All right, I got to get clearance from Principal B, everybody. Principal B, thank you so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure. Best of luck to you there, Aaron.
All right, and you all stick around. I have a great free app that your students, or maybe you, can learn how to prepare for the SAT, the ACT, AP courses. It is a phenomenal app, and I'll tell you all about it next when you get educated. All right, it's time to get educated. I found this company called Revise. Revise is basically the trendy Reels / TikTok style short form videos just to teach all kinds of subjects. And the first start they made was SAT, ACT prep. So I was immediately drawn to that because I do a lot of content creation. So I connected with them and was able to create some content for the app. Upon working for them more, though, they've got a fantastic idea here. Eventually, in their long-term plans are to make short video courses targeted to homeschool audiences. So it's good that you can get in now and help encourage them to move in this direction. But I'm going to show you what the app looks like. So this is an app that you can download on a phone or an iPad or any device, that your child might be using. Now, if you take a look here, let me get my pictures sorted out here. My goodness here. All right. What kind of show am I running? If you get their app, your phone screen will look like this. Right now, you can click on College Process, which is all kinds of college tips, help writing your college essay, everything you need to know. And then it goes into big time detail about all of the sections of the SAT test. And there are other things holding that will be released in the future. Now, if you click on math, it goes into about every single topic. You hit apply and you're given videos by all different creators that do videos on that specific topic. So you can literally sit and learn. And the advantage of scrolling on this site, as opposed to a random social media, you aren't pushed out to different content. In other words, everything you see will be exactly what you pick to see. There'll be no rabbit trails about this and that, and there's no advertising. So it is ideal. You want to look into, like, say, ACT reading. There you go. You've got all the major sections. And of course, it's going to break down each part one at a time. Also, what about writing? You bet. Yeah, here's your SAT writing. You can see all the details are on there. Now, just for my audience, I'm going to give you a sneak peek of some of the newest projects they're working on. First, here's an example. After a certain set of videos, this is not new, by the way. After a certain set of videos you watch, automatically a quiz comes up. And you get a question to test you on your SAT knowledge. And the video that it's from pops up too, right down there. And so if you don't know, you go back and watch the video again, and then you can answer your question. And then it also keeps score and keeps track, and you can get on a streak and get on fire. It's actually really cool and really fun. All right, on to the new sneak peek that you have access to if you would like. Revise is going to start listing these mini units. And so one of the first ones they filmed was with me. They're working on others as well, with other charming content creators. And what I did was put together a 10 video series on the algebra section on the SAT and ACT test. These are short 5-minute videos to 6 to 7 to 8-minute videos. There's 10 of them. They all run in a series. At the end, you get all kinds of SAT test taking tips that will help you with time and that sort of thing. In the show notes today, I'm going to give you the link that you can go sign up for it, get your email, your phone number in. They'll put you in a group and give you early access. So if you're a beta tester, you get it for free, because eventually after this 1 week or so period, it's going to be a cost associated with it. The general app will always be free as of now. The general SAT, ACT study videos that you can watch and learn from, and the college videos. But the mini courses are going to be part of a paid for product on the app. So, hey, pay close attention. I'm going to put that link down in the show notes today. And also, I'm going to give you all the information you need to download this amazing app. And stick around. We're going to go take a peek at the public schools.
Here we go. Screwball in the side pocket.
So, welcome to the public school peek. Yeah, you know what? I'm kind of second guessing putting down the public school system and the public school teachers and the way the students are out of control. So I've asked this teacher to do an interview with me. And, it's in response to a lot of people thinking that, the classes sort of are held hostage and they can't think for themselves and they have to think the same way as everybody, things like that. That's kind of the kids just are just saying the things because the teacher wants to hear it. Yeah, well, our teacher here is going to clear some of that up. So first, I think a great question would be, do your kids know your pronouns and do they respect them? I'd love to hear their answers.
So, first and foremost, what are my pronouns? They, them. So they all know my pronouns. It's they, them. It's quite simple. And then the next question was, do y'all respect those pronouns? Yes.
Wow, I guess they really did sound excited and happy to be answering your questions. Now, another thing. Why do you think people believe this about the public schools? Do you guys talk about anything else besides, your pronouns, etc.?
I feel like some people think that, for whatever reason, some kids don't respect the pronouns. And I'm like, it's not y'all that don't respect the pronouns. It's people on social media who, can't gather that. You know what I mean? So it's just weird to me that that's what people think. So y'all respect the pronouns. I don't ever really have issues with y'all not respecting my pronouns. If you ever make a mistake, what do I say? Teacher Roby. That's it. I just say Teacher Roby, right? Do I get mad at y'all or yell at y'all or be upset at y'all?
No. Oh, okay. More on pronouns. Okay. I was kind of asking if there was anything else, but that's okay. I do like at the end when you led your class to give you the answer you want. I mean, I like how you didn't lead your class to give them the answer that you wanted. That's really great teaching. Really great teaching. See, everybody, what did I tell you? We shouldn't be so hard on these teachers. Honestly. All right, everyone, you're in for a treat. Next up, we go to the teacher's lounge and we sit down to interview Dr. Henderson, rocket scientist and professor at Embry-Riddle University. Welcome, everybody, to the teacher's lounge, where I usually sit down, grab a stale cup of coffee, and I'm going to offer one to our guest today. Our guest joining us, and might I add, fresh off a call with SpaceX, yeah, we'll ask him about that, is my friend and professor, Dr. Troy Henderson. Dr. Henderson, thanks for joining us.
Aaron, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, man, I was excited when you agreed to come on and sit in because I figured our audience would like to hear from somebody that had a job like they're a rocket scientist of some sort that might give a little credibility, so.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's get into it.
All right. First of all, before we get into anything else, can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing with SpaceX, and then if any families listening are interested in following along with it, if we can tell them how to track that, and then I can leave links in the show notes.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. So I'll be a little bit clear. We're actually working on a couple of projects that involve collaboration with different companies in space, but I'll get to that in a minute. Quick introduction. You already said my name, Troy Henderson.
Yes, go right ahead.
Yeah, I'll give the quick background.
Yes.
So I'm an associate professor at Embry-Riddle, and I teach aerospace engineering. So what I do professionally is train up undergraduate and graduate students in the math, science, engineering that is required to build and operate spacecraft. So that's what we're doing. We've got a mission launching here, hopefully in mid-February is our target launch date, which is just a couple weeks away. For those watching later, I guess I need to remember that.
Yes.
And that program is called Eagle Cam, and I'll get you the link for that, and you can
Definitely.
put in the show notes. But that is it's about half the size of a loaf of bread, and it's going to the moon with 4 cameras, and we'll be taking some really cool pictures. So we're really excited about that. It's going to land on the lunar surface. Hopefully the first American-built thing since the Apollo days in 1972. So
that would be great.
We'll get there. And then the reason I was just on the phone and coming in late to this discussion here is we've got another collaboration with a group called the Polaris program, which is a all-civilian commercial partnership. So it's outside of the normal government NASA-based astronaut corps. So Polaris Dawn is the first mission, and we have an experiment flying there. And that will be capturing 3-dimensional VR and thermal data and a couple other things on a spacewalk. So the first all-civilian spacewalk, which is going to be really cool, very historical, literally out of this world. So it'll be great.
Golly, that's amazing. That's amazing. And I'll make sure and have in the show notes way they can find more information about that as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I should add that my student team, I'm the director of the Space Technologies Lab at Embry-Riddle. So in that role, like I said, I work with a lot of students, and both of these projects that I just described have been designed, developed, built, tested, and will be operated by myself and the student team.
Yeah, that's amazing. And if you happen to know somebody who's a director of a space lab, you do get an inside peek from time to time. So
That's right.
Pretty amazing stuff.
Welcome to show up anytime.
Yeah. Okay. Be careful with that. Okay. So anyway, you gave us a little bit of background and told us about who you are, what you do, and all the fun stuff that gets added to it. So my first question has to be, I mean, you have been in school for a lot longer than, a normal person who did some college or has a bachelor's or got a few hours in here or there. And so I would be interested from that point of view, when you decided homeschooling was the choice for your children, and anything about how that came about, along with tying into a lot of people, that have a lot of degrees, they have a lot of faith in public education. So talk us through that.
Sure. So first off, faith and faith-based education and being able to talk about the God of the Bible in curriculum and in a home setting is very important for me and for my kids. Yes. So that's step one. That is something that I was not willing to compromise on.
All right, me too.
From the educational aspect, being a faculty member at a university and seeing standards and quality morphing and honestly lowering coming up through, when you and I were in school versus when students today are in school, the expectations are very, very different. And we see this, we see this on a very broad scale. There's literal research publications about the test scores and everything else, and how students just aren't performing, students in the United States especially, aren't performing up to standards that we used to be. So being able to um, put together a curriculum that is tailored for each student, being my children, being able to stop and pause and revisit something if somebody got stuck, not teaching to a test, but teaching to learn. Those were really important things in that decision to pull our kids. And I'll say this. I have 4 boys, and my youngest son has never been to public school. My second youngest son did kindergarten in public school, and my 2 older did K through 4 and K through 3. So
Okay.
they are minus a year in there. Sorry, I should have. There was a year we were out and then went back for 1 year, but
no one's keeping track.
That's right. So not tons of public education in their background, but a little flavor. So to kind of add to that, when I took the position here and we moved our family to Florida, one of our sons had a very rough go in elementary school, and was not given any support, to the point where his teacher and I were having a discussion about his performance, and she made the claim that the girls in the class got this one concept and the boys didn't, but they had to move on, and all the boys did terrible. So
Okay.
that was just something that just struck me of, why in the world am I entrusting somebody else to educate my kids and to teach them to take a test and not to think? So that was really kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. And we've homeschooled since then. So the boys have done very well. We've used a variety of different curriculums, co-ops, home study, on a little bit of smattering of online study, and various things, and all types of forms. So being able to do that and not have that hard timeline of, hey, we got to finish this because we got to move on, because this is on the test right at the end of the year, and there's no evaluation like that, and it opens up. My kids have a whole variety of interest, and it opens up the ability for them to pursue some of those. Couple of my boys are really interested in history, so they spend a little more time in history. One of them's very interested in math and aviation, so he spent more time there, right? So there's that ability to tailor a little bit more as well, but not to get lost. And I'll finish this off here real quick. I am a professor, so I talk a lot just by training, I guess.
It's okay. It's all great information.
The last thing that I'll say about that is, and I said this, but I want to emphasize, training people to think. So at the college level, and the courses I teach are junior, senior level, and then graduate level courses. So I teach juniors through PhD students. I mentor students from freshman through PhD. I work with them, one-on-one in a lab setting outside of the classroom as well. But I just want to emphasize that being able to think, being able to problem solve, understanding how things fit together is infinitely more important than if you bubble in B or C on an exam.
Oh my God.
And I'm not just talking about academically. I'm talking about, getting that extracurricular piece, being outside of the classroom and in the lab, finding a job, making that job into a career, having a family, et cetera, right? So being able to work on a team, being able to understand the dynamics of a problem and working with other people, right? I mentioned this earlier, some of the projects we're working on, those
Yeah.
are with outside commercial entities, and
Uh,
those corporations work very differently than a university typically does. So there's some dynamic there that we have to
mhm.
come through. There's challenges that pop up all the time. Space flight is hard. Um,
I don't understand it.
there's
Yeah.
well, I mean, there have been some very unfortunate, but very I don't know the right way to say this. We've learned a lot from some recent mistakes from different companies and groups trying to do different things,
Yeah.
like moon landing. Um, there's a statistic that says something somewhere in the order of 45 to 55% of vehicles that go into space, any system that goes into space that's built by a university, fails from the very first second it's in space.
Oh, man.
So, but the opportunity to learn, the opportunity for these students to grow,
Yep.
to take something outside of the classroom and put their hands on a physical thing that becomes tangible. That's why I do what I do. But also hopefully there's some either scientific value or value for life on Earth and people seeing glory of God's creation somewhere along the
Yeah,
way.
right. That's right. Yeah, and I just wanted to clarify, when you were working in these groups for outside companies and groups within the college students that you have teams of students. Now, I'm just making sure, and I'm pretty sure of the
Yeah.
answer, but everybody's always the same age working on the same thing, right? In the real world and in your field.
Yeah, that's not quite right there,
Oh,
Aaron.
okay.
But
Wait a minute. That's school. Oh,
at
right,
school, right?
right. Yeah.
So I'll give you a quick example. Eagle Cam, which is launching soon. We had students from sophomores through very advanced PhD students. So, second year through year 7 to 8 potentially in college, right?
Yeah.
So that 5, 6 year age different easily, and a whole variety of skills. We had a student from the business school running finances and project management. We had lots of aerospace engineers because that's where I am. We had lots of guys doing electronics and software and mechanical design and just the whole gambit of things that it takes to make a project successful.
Yeah, that's so cool.
And
I
that's
love,
real world.
yeah, right. And I love what you said about like being able to think, and a lot of things that are missed in the public school due to time and schedule restraints and testing schedules are those soft skills. Can you collaborate? Can you think outside the box? Can you problem solve? Can you critically analyze something? And I would like to say most of our kids who are homeschooled are getting that on a daily or weekly basis because just the fact, number one, that they're around other types and other ages of people. The homeschool community as a whole is pretty well known for little kids up to old kids kind of being together. Of course, we break them up in their classes, but that's just such an important skill in my career too. I feel very, very uneducated in around Dr. Henderson, but I have been able to use some of those abilities to my advantage, leverage those skills that a lot of other people didn't have, even when they could dance circles around me with the knowledge, and there were things that I didn't know, but I fit the piece of the team better than someone else that knows a whole lot more than me.
Yeah, no, and absolutely. And there was a study several years ago. I should have this on my fingertips here for you, but that when Google was hiring everybody they could for a while, the things they were looking for were actually more soft skills.
I remember that.
They wanted that technical capability, but they wanted those soft skills equally or more so than that ability to sit at a computer and develop the next Google tool. And I'll give you a really cool example. This happened yesterday. My I mentioned my boys homeschool, so seeing them working together, um, one has a problem and doesn't understand something, and if I'm not available that very second, he
Right.
has multiple older brothers to say, "Hey, what does this mean? What does this word mean? How can I better phrase this sentence? Or how do I solve this math problem? I forgot something about fractions." And so there is that ability to, number one, collaborate. Number two, figure out how to get along with people.
Right.
Right, of different ages at different stages in life.
Yeah.
All of those things that are so important. And then, but that also, from the academic standpoint, says, let me go back to something that I learned before and either refresh myself or
Yeah.
help someone to understand that in a way that's, appropriate to where they are. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's just a really cool example of, I got to see my kids do that yesterday, right? Where one of the older ones stopped and said, "Okay, let's sit down and think through this a little bit
So cool.
before you say that or before you do that." Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And also the fact, like you kind of mentioned too, as a homeschool parent, being the main teacher, you do go back and you're like, oh, wait a minute. Okay,
Oh
that's what
yeah.
they're doing. What did I learn about that?
Right.
And
Right.
going back and relearning it, it's like keeps your brain fresh.
Yeah, no, and absolutely. And I mean, that translates into my career a little bit, where I was doing ratios with my youngest son in math a couple weeks ago, and I thought, oh, that's actually what I'm about to teach, something relevant to that in my class. So here's a great way to present that. So,
Yes.
just it clicked in my head of, hey, you know what? I can actually, as a teacher, go into a classroom of 30 graduate students and say, hey, here's something that might make a little more sense because it's a little bit different than the way it's traditionally explained.
Definitely. Yeah, yeah, definitely. And also, I was talking earlier to old Principal B about a headline from our city,
Hmm.
Daytona Beach News Journal. And it was going through multiple parents, just listing it, type and thing after learning tool after whatever, and just how flexible you could be. And so a lot more of the articles I'm reading are continuing to like highlight some of these things, but then they always have the back end where the experts are concerned, because there's not benchmarks,
Yeah.
and then the typical thing will happen where you'll have one kid who is homeschooled, and they had a bad experience, so it's kind of
Yeah.
paints a dark picture of homeschooling by
That's
the
that's the one kid that they quote in the article, right? Yeah.
right, compared to the 5 6 whatever that were very positive. Okay,
Sure.
so let me ask you this. You mentioned earlier when you were talking that you've noticed as kids are graduating high school and coming to you in college classrooms, you've noticed a big drop in achievement, a big drop in what they expect to have to do.
Mhm.
And so I think that's interesting to see, because the data right now at the public schools is bleak, very bleak. And I know even at a university like Embry-Riddle, you guys are getting people that are, a little up there on the small end of the side, where people are actually proficient in
Sure.
these things. And
Sure.
so, it's interesting that you noticed even a drop in those students that are very smart and very even highly motivated. How socially, because of the environment they were in, probably weren't pushed to perform, as high as they could. It
Yeah.
seems logical to me.
Yeah, no doubt. And I can comment on that a little bit. And I'll add in the official disclaimer here that I'm not talking on behalf of the university, but on behalf of myself,
Yes,
and
please.
things I've noticed here. Um, yeah, there's lots of Ivy League and top tier schools have been doing away with things like the SAT, the GRE for graduate school, for a variety of reasons. One of those reasons is that, um, there was there was some studies that there was almost a weird grade inflation that was going along with the SAT, if you will. So students weren't actually performing better. It's that the numbers were adjusted so that students looked to be performing better, but they were lacking a whole variety of certain skills. Maybe they were better at taking the test, and I'm no expert in this part, but I see the effect of that, right? Um,
Mhm.
the that ability of students to be pushed to excel um, is very difficult to do in a traditional public education classroom because with the when I first started homeschooling, one of the things that baffled me, and I think I talked to you about this, Aaron, a long time ago, was my kids were done with their work in a matter of a few hours.
Yeah,
And
right.
and me coming out of the public school system and thinking,
Right.
8 a.m. to 3 p.m. and they're done at noon
I
and
know.
I'm thinking, wait a second, they're not being challenged academically, but in fact, they're excelling academically
Yes.
because they have this freedom. There's not the issue of disciplinary action. There's not the let's just stand up and move just because it's time to stand up and move. There's not that awkward, rigid
Assemblies, class
schedule.
changes,
Absolutely.
announcements. Dis-
All of those things get tossed out the window, and it's, hey, you wake up when you wake up on a given day, and we're going to have breakfast. We're going to start in with what we need to get doing today. And when you finish, once that work is complete, yes, I mean, you've got some free time to
yeah.
pursue whatever other interest you want. And that was hard for me at the beginning because I thought, man, they're coasted on this stuff. But in fact, some of their writing samples, some of their,
Yeah.
the math that they were able to do. We were doing, science experiments, and their understanding and their knowledge and their ability to talk to people about what they were doing was just baffling. And I mean, that's some of the comments that I think a lot of homeschool parents get sometimes is, wow, your child is just so able to hold an adult
I
conversation,
know.
right? And I love that. I love that my 11-year-old can
Yes.
walk up to a random grandma in the grocery store and have an actual conversation, right? So there's some great things like that. So to kind of hopefully get back to the meat of your question there,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that seeing seeing students not pushed to their academic potential and given that ability to find a passion and an interest has been doing them tons of harm. And I can even kind of point back to myself in high school where high school wasn't terribly hard for me. I mean,
Hmm.
parts of it were, certainly some emotional things were, but
Yeah.
academically, there was a lot of times where I was not stressed, right? Um, and even the beginnings of college were like that. But once I really had to buckle down and learn how to study and figure out what's going on. I don't remember if I said this earlier. My bachelor's degree is in physics with an emphasis in space physics and computational math. So that's not an easy thing to do, right? And
Didn't sound
we
like it.
were
Yeah.
I wrote a paper as an undergraduate student on how physicists thought that stars formed in the very, very early stages. And so, there's all types of things like that that you're not even exposed to in high school, much less understand the breadth of where you could go in college, or career. I shouldn't push college on people.
Right. Right.
I am a college professor by training and trade and profession here, but I'm not here to push college on anybody, by the way.
Yep.
So, um, yeah, the students coming in to a lot of schools, and this is a kind of a nationwide trend, and I've talked to a lot of colleagues at other universities. They look at the dollar sign at the end of, how much money am I going to make by choosing this degree or that degree?
Yep.
And the thing they're missing out on is they're missing out on a passion, they're missing out on a drive, they're missing out on a want to, where's your heart in that, right?
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, the United States college system right now is producing a lot of students who are coming out in significant debt and will work a job for a few years
Right.
and then burn out and realize they hate it. Um,
Yeah.
and as a faculty member, I hate seeing that. Right? I mean, this is one of the worst things you could think of as a student who sat through your class. But that's, to me, that's one of the benefits of homeschool. Is
Yes.
I have a son that wants to be a firefighter, and so he can pursue things that lead to that within the homeschool curriculum. I have
Yep.
another son that's more interested in computing and computers, and so he can pursue that through some of his homeschooling and learning, a little bit about electronics, learning a little bit about software, and even as a late middle school, early high school student, he can get some experience just in doing that through an infinite number of resources, right? So that to me is one of the big things. Is homeschooling really allows that passion to be figured out.
Mhm.
It allows the student to be the individual.
Yes.
It's not trying to conform them to a particular mold.
Yep.
We don't need everybody to go to college. We don't need everybody to go to work. We need people who are passionate, who are dedicated, like you said, these soft skills, who can work together, who can problem solve. I mean, the world would be a very different place if that were the
Yes.
case.
I agree. I agree. Oh my goodness. I thought of all kinds of different stories of my own on my end to illustrate all the things you were talking about, because it's all such good information, and I imagine as you're saying these things throughout the topics we're covering, I imagine a lot of people at home are like, oh yeah, my kids are like that. Oh yeah, my kid gets to do that. Yeah. So anyway, I have a final question to ask you
Yeah, you
here.
bet.
Now, have you perchance ever had a homeschool graduate come into one of your courses or into the university?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer is a resounding yes. And I wish, and maybe what I'll do is give you his contact, and so you could have him on at some point,
Oh,
because
that would be
he's
great.
he's actually I, I'm tempted to not name him, so
Okay,
you can
yeah,
have him
probably
on for
best.
later. So
Probably
I
best.
have a former student who was homeschooled K through 12, um, went to a Christian college, did fantastic, and then came to Embry-Riddle to work with me on a master's degree and stayed around for a PhD degree, and now works at a major aerospace corporation in the state of Florida. So he by far was one of the better students to come through our program.
Wow.
He won multiple awards, including some of the first awards any student at Embry-Riddle had won, and I'll name those. There's a graduate fellowship called I'm going to say it wrong. The acronym is NDSEG, National Defense Science and Engineering Graduate Fellowship. So it's funded by the Department of Defense, and it's money to go and pursue something related to aerospace defense sector research. And his research proposal and his academic credentials qualified him, and that was the first recipient of that particular fellowship at Embry-Riddle.
Wow.
And then later on, I nominated him for there's our professional society in the aerospace engineering world. The main one is AIAA. It's the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, and they every year award 20 students who are in their 20s based on a nomination. And I nominated my student, and he was Embry-Riddle's first AIAA 2020s is the award
Wow.
winner. And a lot of the reason that he was so successful in our program is that he knew how to think and work independently, but to bring that back and present it to a group. And he's written a handful of articles that were peer reviewed and published in scientific engineering journals. He wrote, co-authored, man, it's some ridiculous number, something around 20 different papers that were presented at technical conferences over the years he was here. In fact, we just did one based on his dissertation work in January at a major conference. So, and he was able to get some accolades and some direction from the Air Force Research Lab on some different problems that they were interested in and we were interested in terms of how orbits work for spacecraft going from the Earth to the moon, and all this very advanced math that nobody had ever thought to do before. And
wow.
Yeah, so he's a ridiculously smart person. But one of the things that I appreciated most about him was that calm demeanor when he could come back to the group and go, this worked, this didn't. Let's talk about why one did and one didn't. Let's work through this with some integrity. And that was another thing that we had around the same time. I had a student get caught plagiarizing some of the work. A not homeschooled student get plagiarized doing some of the work for a paper.
Well, that's not a big deal now. Harvard's president was caught multiple times, and they did eventually make her step down, but she's still a teacher there, so.
Yeah, but that's not something that you get away with in my group. So working through some things with integrity, like I was saying, of, man, we have this deadline coming up and this just isn't working. So we need to kind of hit pause and take a step back and either go back to the whiteboard or sit down at the computer and run our simulations, or something happened in our experiment or whatever it was. But being able to do that, which was really cool. So this particular student, he's been married for a little while now, and they're starting to look at starting a family, he and his wife. And I asked him right before he got married, I was like, you going to homeschool? And he said, no, without a doubt, right? Absolutely, I'm going to homeschool.
Amazing.
So that speaks volumes that, one of the better students I've had in my scratching at 10 years here at Embry-Riddle came through the homeschool program and was able to not only hang in there with everybody else, but he excelled. I mean, some of the numbers that we like to look at as metrics, not me personally, but we as a university or a department like to lolook at of publications and some of the outreach events and all these other things, and he was able to get a really good job. That speaks volumes to his preparation and his ability to just jump in and do.
Yeah. That's amazing. I'm so glad you told me about that. And do make sure you give him my information, because I would love to have him on the show.
Will do.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Henderson, thank you so much for giving us some of your time between your very important SpaceX calls.
All right. Thanks, Aaron. Great to talk to you.
All right. Take care.
See ya. Bye.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I'll have the link to the article we talked about in Homeroom Headlines. I'll have the link to the app we talked about on Get Educated, and I'll have all kinds of information for you to follow along with everything Dr. Henderson's doing. All right, you guys, we will see you next time.